Next one is known as the WIC, Wake Up Interrupt Controller. Again, WIC is an optional component. It depends upon the manufacturer whether it is available or not. So in the case of WIC, there is no programmable register to configure because it gets all the information through the NVIC. There is no other separate programmable register in order to configure that. If the WIC is available, it will be working by its own. Right. So what is the advantage of that? The clock signals to a processor clock will be completely controlled by the WIC. Whatever clock you are giving to a processor, it will be completely controlled by the WIC. Whenever an interrupt request is coming, WIC will be sending a request to power management units in order to wake the processor up. Right. Say for example, this is a diagram. Whenever an IRQ or an NMI request is coming to the WIC, WIC will send a wake up request to the power management unit, which in turn restore the or reset, which in turn bring the processor back to the active state by restoring the processor clock. So most of the Cortex M3 processor will be most of the part of the processor will be in sleep mode, in deep sleep mode, right? So whenever you are executing a deep sleep mode, most of the processor components will be in deep sleep mode, and there will be a small portion of certain logic that only will be active. What is the use of that? In order to retain the current state, current processor state. Because I told, whenever you are going to an interrupt and when you are coming back from the interrupt, whatever state the processor was in, that is whatever level or whatever mode the processor was in, say if it is in privileged thread mode, when the processor is coming out of the handler, it should go back to the same mode, privileged thread mode. That means the processor state and mode should be retained. So the same thing should be applicable here also. When a processor is coming out of the deep sleep mode, it should retain the state and mode. How it will retain? By using certain logic gates, certain mechanism is there. That is known as state retention power gating. Right. So even though you are in deep sleep mode, a certain part of certain logic will be active in order to store the corresponding level and states. So that when you are coming back from that state, coming back from the sleep mode, the same state and mode will be preserved. So that mechanism is known as state retention power gating. So in that case, the maximum interrupt latency will be the time required to power up the system. Right. Wake up interrupt controller, what does it do? Whenever interrupt is coming, it will wake the processor up. So what will be the maximum interrupt latency there? Time required to power up the system based on the manufacturer. Generally, it will be 20 to 30 clock cycles. Then again, WIC will stop the system tick timer during the deep sleep mode. So system tick timer itself will be stopped if the processor is in deep sleep mode. And this feature, when it is this power down feature is disabled when the debugger is accessing the processor. Right. When you are trying to debug the processor or the controller, what it is actually doing? You are reading the contents of debug registers, which shows the status of the operation what you have done previously. So whenever you are performing debug operation, this deep sleep mode will not work. So this power down feature or wake up interrupt controller feature will be disabled when you are performing debugging operation, because you need to read from the debug registers. So this is a diagram showing that. So whenever IRQ or NMI is coming, WIC will detect that. It will send a wake up request to power management unit. Right. So the power management unit will restore power to the processor when WIC is generating an interrupt, power as well as clock. So what is the basic function of a WIC? It will detect and hold the interrupt requests until the processor is coming back to active state. It will detect and also hold the interrupt request, because whenever the interrupt is coming, it should hold that until the processor is coming out of sleep state, right? And where will you store the processor in the at the time of deep sleep mode? Now the processor is in deep sleep mode, so the state of the processor will be stored in certain gates, which is a part of state retention flip-flop. It is nothing but state retention flip-flop. So it is not, that mechanism is known as state retention power gating. Next one is how the multi-processor communication is happening. Say if you are having two processes connected together, how the communication is happening in the power down mode or in the other sleep modes. So processor is having two signals. One is known as TXCV and RXCV. So what do you mean by TXCV? It is an output signal which is used for sending out the events. So it is something similar to your TXD pin in UART. Not similar to that. You can consider it something like that, right? So TXCV is used for sending events out from one processor. Say, let us take this is a transmitter, this is a receiver. So if the processor 1 need to send some events to the next processor, TXCV line signal will be used. Then how will the other processor receive it? It will be receiving it through RXCV. So RXCV is used for receiving the events. Right. Then the processor can enter sleep mode when you are executing WFE instruction and can continue the execution when an external event is received. Whenever an external, say when you are executing WFE instruction, processor will be in sleep mode until it is getting an external event. In which pin? RXCV. So similarly, there is another instruction known as SCV instruction. That instruction is used for waking up one processor by sending a signal from the other processor. That instruction is known as SCV. Right. So that you can ensure that both the tasks are synchronized. So we'll see one diagram here. So this is processor 1, processor 2. Right. So normally processor 1 will be has executed WFE. That means it will be sleeping until certain say event has occurred. So it will be in sleep mode. Processor 1 will be in sleep mode. So this information will be sent to the processor 2. Right. So the processor 2 identified that the first one is sleeping. So this also will be in the sleep mode. Then after some time, the processor 2 is detecting certain event and it feels that this is a synchronized task. So both the processor should execute it. Right? It should be synchronized. Whatever task is executing on both the processor should be synchronized. So what does it do? Processor 2 should wake the processor 1 up. So what does it do? It will be executing SCV instruction. Right? SCV instruction is used for waking up one processor with the help of other one. Right? So it will execute SCV. So through the TXCV signal, that signal will be given to RXCV. Right? So whenever processor 1 is receiving a signal in RXCV, that is an input pin of processor 1, what will happen? Processor 1 will come out of the sleep mode. Processor 1 will come out of the sleep mode. And there is a problem here. What is the problem? The processor could be activated by other events also, other than your SCV. The processor 2 has sent an SCV signal, but the processor can be woken up by other events such as interrupt or debugging events. So before synchronizing the task, the processor 1 should check whether your WIC has caused this, or your processor 2 has woken up the processor 1. You need to check whether the waking up process was done from the processor 2 events. Because the processor one can come out of the sleep mode even if it is getting an interrupt or debugging events locally to that processor, right? But before activating the or starting the synchronized task, processor 1 should verify that it has woken up by receiving the signal from the processor 2. Then only it should execute the task, right? So how it will do that? It is done by in this step. It will check the task status. So how it will be checking that? It is a flow chart showing that how it is done. First of all, processor will be executing WFE, right? So it will be in sleep mode, and whenever it is receiving an event, it will check the task status. What is the task status checking? It is checking whether it has been woken up by the task synchronization generated by the processor 2. How it is generating that? Using SCV instruction. So when it is executing an SCV instruction, how does processor 1 identify that it has been executed? There is one local event latch. There will be an event latch. It is a flip-flop. That latch will be set when SCV instruction is executed. So what will the processor 1 do? Processor 1 is basically checking that latch. If that latch is set, then it identifies that it has woken up from the due to the signal generated from processor 2, so that it can run the synchronized task. Whichever synchronized task it should run, it can run that. And finally, after running that, it will check whether the idle loop has to be exited or not. If it has to be exited, it will exit. Otherwise, it will go back to sleep mode. Right? If idle loop should not be executed, then it will go back to sleep mode. And one more thing you need to keep in mind: after synchronizing the task, it will ensure that local event latch is cleared. This latch will be cleared automatically after running the synchronized task. Then only the next synchronization event can be detected, or next event can be detected. So once the synchronization task has been executed, that latch will be cleared. So this is how multiprocessor communication is happening while in the sleep mode. Then last one is self reset control. We have seen the basic of this. So there are two self reset controls available. One is known as system reset. Another one is known as vector reset. So why it is known as self reset control? By executing some code or one instruction, it can reset its own processor and the peripherals or whatever it is. Normally reset will be done as an external process. You will be pressing the external button. But here, by executing an instruction, you can reset the controller or the processor. How will you do that? So there are two provisions for doing that. First one is known as system reset. So in system reset, which all portions will be resetted? Which are the blocks which is getting resetted while performing system resets? So by using system reset, processor core and anything else will be resetted?
NVIC, MPU peripherals, but not the debugging system.
So in the and how will you enable this system? How will you perform this system reset? There is a bit known as system reset request bit in this register, application interrupt and reset control register. In this register, if this bit is set, then system reset will occur. So you can make that bit set in order to perform system reset. So when you are performing that, what is happening? It will assert reset signal to the reset generator. There is something known as reset generator. It will send a signal to that. And this reset generator is not part of Cortex M3 design. What does it do? Which part will be resetted by the reset generator? Any idea? You cannot tell like that. You need to go through the chip manufacturer's data sheet or whatever it is. Right? Because based on the manufacturer, it will be different. Say if I am a manufacturer, my reset generator will be connected to processor and some other basic peripherals. In some other controller, reset generator may be connected to processor and all the other peripherals. So that depends on the manufacturer. Right? So before giving system reset, you need to check which are the blocks which are getting resetted by setting the system reset request bit in application interrupt and reset control register. Similarly, next one is known as vector reset. So how will you enable this? There is a bit known as vector reset bit in the same register, that is bit 0. If you are setting that, vector reset will happen. When you are setting it, which all portion will get resetted? Cortex M3 processor, excluding the debug logic. Right. So this vector reset will be resetting only the processor. It won't reset anything outside the core, outside the processor. Outside the processor, it won't do any reset. So it is used for resetting the processor alone. And if you want to perform the reset by using the software, that means if you want to perform normal reset in your code, it is preferable to use software reset. It is preferable to use software reset. Why? Because not software reset, system reset. So why system reset? Because it can reset the processor as well as external peripherals also based on the chip manufacturer. So all the peripherals and the processor will get resetted at the same time if you are using system reset. But which all blocks will get resetted depends upon the manufacturer. So now we are going to see the debug architecture of Cortex M3. So here in Cortex M3, it is having a special type of debug architecture known as core site architecture. Core site architecture. So they have made some small modification in the core site architecture and they have used it in Cortex M3. Right. So this is the connection diagram representing the connection from debug host to the Cortex M3 processor. So the final debug information will be taken by the debug PC, or it is known as the host. This will be connected to the debug hardware using USB or Ethernet. From this debug interface hardware, it is getting connected to the whole microcontroller using or through JTAG or serial wire interface. In the old controllers, you will be having only JTAG interface, joint test action group interface, 5 lines will be there. But here they have given provision for JTAG as well as serial wire. Serial wire means only 2 lines will be there. So through that interface, it is getting connected to the microcontroller, and inside the microcontroller, there is something known as debug port. So since you are using JTAG or serial wire debug interface, there is SWJ debug port or SW debug port. What do you mean by that? SWJ means serial wire or JTAG debug interface. So if the microcontroller is having only this, it can use both the serial wire and JTAG. Some of the controllers will be having only serial wire debug port, so we cannot use JTAG. Right. So this is known as a debug host interface in the microcontroller. You are connecting this debug host through the debug hardware to this host interface. This is known as a debug host interface. This block, what does this block do? This block will convert the external signals coming through the JTAG or serial wire interface to a general bus interface form known as debug access port bus interface form. Right, it will convert this JTAG commands coming through the JTAG signals into a 32-bit general bus interface, generic 30-bit bus interface or bus format known as DAP bus format. It is known as a DAP bus. So DAP bus is nothing but the processor debug interface. Because this is your processor, this is your microcontroller. So serial wire JTAG debug port is a debug host interface. DAP bus is a processor debugging interface. Through this you are connecting to a processor. And it is getting connected to AHB access point. So what is the use of this debug? What is this debug bus interface? How many bit address it can have? It can have 32-bit address in this bus interface. In this 32-bit, upper 8 bits is used for selecting the device that is to be accessed. DAP bus interface is 32-bit. In that 8-bit is dedicated for specifying the device. So in the Cortex M3, there is only one device address used. Right, you can see only one device address is used for connecting the Cortex M3. So remaining 256 total using the 8-bit address, you can specify maximum of 256 device. You can debug 256 device, but for interacting with the Cortex M3, only one device address is used. Right, that is why it is connected only one to this one to AHBAP. So similar kind of theoretically similar 255 Cortex M3 processors or any other access points can be connected. Because in debug access port, it is handling 32-bit address, 8-bit is dedicated for the device that is to be debugged or accessed. And in Cortex M3, only through one device you are interacting or connecting the debug bus. Only one access point is there. That is known as AHP access point. So since for Cortex M3 as a whole, only one access point is used, similar kind of 255 devices can be accessed through the debug access port theoretically. Practically, many problems will be there and nobody will be allowing that many access also. But theoretically, you can connect that. Right. So debug bus is connected to AHB-AP of Cortex M3. So what does this AHB-AP do? AHB-AP will convert the commands which is sent through the debug port, through the debug access port to AHB transfers, or it will convert it into AHB standard so that it can be inserted into the internal network or to the internal interconnect so that it can access the memory and the other registers related to Cortex M3 core and NVIC. Right. Why you are converting these commands into AHB format using this? Because if we are giving the information in AHB format, then only the Cortex M3 registers, memory map and NVIC can be accessed for the debug purpose. Right. So here debugging is also considered as same as accessing the data or program from the memory. So when you are performing the debugging, the operation is same as that you are reading the data from the registers for read and write in the normal program. So this is the connection showing debug host and the Cortex M3. Then in the Cortex M3 architecture, there are various trace interfaces. What are the various trace interfaces available in this coming under CoreSight architecture? First one is instruction trace, data trace, debug message. What is the use of instruction trace? It is generated by ETM, embedded trace macro cell. It will give the instruction trace. It will give information regarding which instruction is executed now. Right. Then data trace. It is generated by data watch point and trace unit. So DWT gives information on the data trace. And there is one more trace known as debug message. What is that? And it is generated by ITM. What will be the debug message? It will show some messages, right, using the printf in the debugger GUI. That means if some operation is completed, you can add one printf there, showing that that operation is completed. Right. So that is nothing but debug message. So these are the three trace interfaces available in Cortex M3 debug architecture. And after tracing, when the trace operation is completed, what will happen to the trace results? The trace results will be in the form of data packets, or which trace information that will be the output of trace sources such as ETM, DWT, ITM, etc. What will happen to that? That will be sent to ATB bus or ATB interface, advanced trace bus. So whatever trace information you are getting, that will be sent to the ATB. And in certain devices, you will be having multiple trace sources. So let us take ETM and DWT. Both are sending the trace information. So what does it do? There will be different traces coming from both of these devices, ETM and DWT. So what does it do? These data streams can be merged together using something known as ATB funnel. Right. So ATB funnel is used for merging the trace information coming from different trace sources. Right. And what will happen? The final merged data stream will be sent to the trace port interface unit, because the final interface unit for the trace information is trace port interface unit. We have seen, I think, few classes before, which is taken to the external trace hardware. Right. So before sending the information to the trace port interface unit, ATB funnel will merge all the trace informations coming from different sources. Right. And when it is reaching the debug host through the external trace hardware, when it is reaching there, whatever merging you have done will be converted back to different trace streams, so that it will be visible in the debug GUI as data trace or instruction trace or whatever it is. Right. So different kinds of different trace information coming from various trace sources will be merged together using ATB funnel, and it will be sent to TPIU. Right. And when it is reaching the debug host, it will be that merging it will be separated or converted back to the previous data streams, so that it can be easily monitored in the debug software as instruction trace or data trace or debug message. Then these are the characteristics of standard CoreSight architecture. So I told in Cortex M3 few modifications that they have made on standard Cortex M3, but first we will see what are the features of standard CoreSight. So first feature is the memory content and peripheral registers can be monitored even when the processor is running. You don't need to hold to the processor for viewing the content of memory and peripheral registers generally. Then multiprocessor debug interface can be controlled with a single debug hardware. That is what I told. In debug access port, you are having 32-bit address. So theoretically, 256 processors can be debugged using a single hardware. But in the case of test action port, which was previously present, only one device can be connected. Then internal debug interfaces are based on simple bus design. What is that simple bus design? AHB transfers. So the internal debugging, in this case, internal debugging features are based on simple bus design. Here it is AHB transfers, so that it is easily scalable, and whatever things you want to add in the next version, you can add that, because it is same as your normal data transfer available in the controller or in the processor. Right. Then the last one is what you have told just now. Different trace streams can be merged together, and when it is reaching debug host, you can separate it back. Right. So these are the 4 characteristics of standard core sites. Then next we will see what are the modifications you have done on the standard core site, so that it has been adapted to Cortex M3. So the first modification is trace components are specially designed in Cortex M3. How it is specially designed? In the ATB interface, it is only 8-bit wide. ATB interface is only 8-bit wide. What does that ATB means? Advanced trace bus. It is given here, ATB interface. So in the case of normal Cortex core site architecture, ATB interface is 8-bit, 32-bit wide. But here we are adapting it to 8-bit only, because some other limitations of the gate count and other things. Then the debug implementation does not support trust zone in Cortex M3. Right? Trust zone, it is something which provides certain security features. Then debug components are part of the system memory itself. But in core site normal or standard core site architecture, separate bus will be there for debug system, separate bus will be for other memory map, etc. But here only same system memory map is used for debug components also. Right. Debug components are part of the same system memory map. But even though we have told that they have made some modification in the core site architecture, the communication interface and the protocols are same as that is used in the core site architecture. So these are the 3 modifications. Then this is a diagram showing we have told here, no? The debug components are part of system memory in Cortex M3. So that is shown in this diagram, standard versus modified core site architecture, right? Debug components are same in the case of modified. You can see only one access point is there. So debug bus is connected to only one access point. From this access point, the system bus, debug architecture, normal memory map, core, NVIC, etc. Everything is connected here. But in the case of basic core site architecture, you can see there are separate access points. APB access points are for the separate devices, debug devices 1, 2, 3, etc. AHB access point is for system bus and your memory, and JTAG access point is for the debug, the JTAG devices. This is the other devices, this is JTAG devices. Right. So this is in the case of standard core site, but in modified core site, only one access point is required for accessing all. That means the debug components are considered as part of the system bus and memory map in Cortex M3. Then what are the debug modes available in Cortex M3? Basic debug modes. So there are two debug modes. One is known as halt mode. Other one is known as debug monitor mode. So from the name itself, you will get the idea. Halt mode means processor should be halted. Execution of the program should be stopped. And if we are performing the debugging operation, that is known as halt mode. Then in debug monitor, what do you mean by debug monitor mode? Processor is not stopped. It will keep on executing its program. While executing the program, if you are able to take the debug information, that is known as debug monitor mode. So here in this mode, processor will be executing a particular exception handler known as, what is that exception handler? Or what is that exception known as? Any idea? So when you are performing, or when the processor debug mode is in debug monitor mode, processor will execute a particular exception to carry out the debug task. What is that exception known as? Debug monitor exception. So while we have seen exceptions in Cortex M3, so many exceptions were there. One was known as debug monitor exception. So that the exception handler related to that will be executed when you are in debug monitor exception. Right? That means processor will be executing that exception handler in order to perform the debug operation, whatever it may be. So these are the two debug modes. These are the features of that. So this is halt mode. In halt mode, we have told instruction execution will be stopped. But system tick timer is also stopped. It will support a single step operation. Normally you will be doing, you will execute one step while debugging operation you will be doing. That is coming under halt mode. You are stopping the processor there. You will execute one instruction, stop the processor, read the data or instruction or whatever it is. That is known as single stepping. While we have done assembly language, we have seen that. Then interrupts can be pended and can be invoked during the single stepping. If some interrupt is coming, it can be pended and invoked when the next instruction is executed, or it can also be masked by using the mask registers while single stepping. By using mask register, it can also be masked. So these are operations in or characteristics of halt mode. But in debug monitor mode, what are the differences? Processor will be executing an exception handler known as debug monitor exception handler. What is the interrupt handler number? 12. Then system tick timer will be continuing. It will not be stopped. It will continue to run. Right. Then since you are executing an interrupt handler for debugging operation in debug monitor mode, if new interrupts are arriving, whether that new interrupts will be executed or not, for debugging operation itself, you are executing an interrupt handler. So if new interrupt is coming, what will happen? In the halt mode, if any interrupt is coming, it can be pended or it can be masked. But here, if new interrupt is coming, what will happen? Because already you are executing an interrupt handler. The interrupt we cannot tell that it will be executed or not. It depends on the interrupt priority, as we have seen in the execution of other exceptions. Right. So if the new interrupt is having high priority than this interrupt 12, it can be executed. Otherwise, it will not be executed. If the debug event is coming when a higher priority interrupt is running, what will happen? Debug event will be missed because it is nothing but an exception handler, same as other handlers. Then here also it supports single stepping operation. Then next characteristics is memory contents can be changed by the debug monitor handler during stacking and handler execution. memory contents of, for example, stack memory can be changed using the debug motor handler in certain cases, right? Then this debug motor can be invoked by debug events as well as by setting the pending bits. There is a separate bit for debug monitor enabling. If you are making that bit as 1, debug monitor will be enabled, or it can be enabled, or it can be entered into that mode by using other debug events. Right? So which is that enable bit? We'll see when you are coming to the flowchart. So we'll see operation carried out in the halt mode and debug monitor mode. So to enable the halt mode, there is a bit known as C_debug enable that should be set. Where is this bit available? In debug halt control and status register, DHCSR. Debug halt control and status. Right? So this is that register. So here C_debug enable should be 1 in order to enable halt mode. Right? And this can be programmed only through DAP. So you cannot halt the Cortex M3 without a debugger in halt mode. If you want to halt the processor in take the processor to halt mode, it can only done with the help of a debugger hardware. That means you can set only this bit through the debug access port. So this is how the halt mode is enabled. Then how will you halt the processor? For that, C halt bit should be set. So this is only for enabling the halt mode. How will you halt the processor? C halt should be set. So this will be valid only if C debug enable is set. So if you want to halt, C halt should be set. Right? This bit can be, and the C halt bit can be set by either debugger or by the programmer. In the program itself, we can make C halt equal to 1. But debug enable bit can only be set by the DAP. Right? And here the bit definition for the read and write operation in the halt mode, there is it is different. So here you can see there are certain registers bits which can only be read. There are other bits which can be read as well as written, and there is one bit which can only be written. So the bit definitions for read and write operations are separate. So for write operation, a debug key is required. Debug key, you have seen while we have seen PLL feed was there, no? So debug key is something similar to that. Right. So bit number 31 to 16, it is used for holding the debug key. This is a debug key, A05F. If this debug key is given in this position of DHCSR, then only you can perform write on these bits. Otherwise, write will not happen. Right? So if you want to perform write operation, debug key, what is the debug key? A05F should be given in these bits 31 to 16. Then only you can perform write in these bits of DHCSR, debug halt control and status register. For read operation, that read key is not required, right? And when you are reading, what you are reading actually? You are reading these bits, upper half word. These bits. What is this? These are the status bits. Which are the status bits? First one is core has been resetted or being reset. That is shown by this bit. Instruction is completed since last read. That is this bit. If processor has gone to lockup state, this bit will be set. If core is in sleep mode, this bit will be set. If the processor is halted, this bit will be set, right? And if the debugger is trying to read or write something into the debug registers or other registers, this bit will be set. Right. Whether it will show whether the read or write operation is completed in the debug process. This bit details we will see later. It is coming in the next slide. So this bit we will be seeing there. This bit shows whether the read or write operation on the register is completed during the debug process. Right. So this is the register associated with the halt mode. Right. And here you need to keep this also in mind. These bits can only be resetted by the power on reset. If you are performing system reset, this won't be resetted, these bits, because these are something related with the debug operation. While you are performing system reset, these bits will not be reset. If you want to reset these bits or to clear these bits, you need to perform power on reset.